are Stormvermin, both variants, ending in patch 6.2.2. I'm genuinely torn how to write this intro. In absolute killing power, Stormvermin belong to the C tier of tier lists just like you've seen from other YouTubers. If you are playing on Legendary, that also colors your opinion. What about the normies playing on less brutal difficulties? What about using less optimal armies, especially early game? This isn't just about good or bad. It's when Stormvermin are a necessary evil, the keyword being necessary. Let's start with Sword and Board. Recruited for 950 gold and 230 upkeep default. On Ultra they come with 160 entities with 9,920 health between them, or 62 per. Armor is 90 for each, with bronze quality shields blocking 35% of small arms fire. I have just told you 90% of what you need to carve upon your heart in terms of this unit. What entity count feels more natural for a high armor unit? It's not 120, that's Swordsmen and Elven Spearmen. Maybe 100 like Saurus Warriors or even Chaos Warriors? How about 80 like Chosen? It's not 160 entities like Skink Cohorts. More entities is often a curse, not a blessing in certain ways, sure. The total unit health is not as high as a lot of Nurgle infantry, let alone zombies. Certain spells will be especially brutal against them. But in melee, cutting them down in sufficient quantities is annoying. It's a brutal slog, and enemies that do not prosper in brutal slogs will feel it. Back to the stat breakdown. Leadership of 70 is shockingly un-Skaven-like. These rats don't come to play. Speed 38 and charge speed 45 is disturbingly nimble despite the armor. Melee attack begins at 38, which you'd like to be higher, and attack interval 4.6 is significantly lower than usual, but not brutally so. Keep thinking, there's a lot of these entities in this unit. There is also no splash damage. Melee defense begins at 36, which reflects on how even if the armor isn't slowing down foot speed, it's still a bit stiff for fighting. Weapon strength 34 is split between base 25 and armor piercing 9 damage, so they do not hit like Black Orcs. Again, 160 entities. Remember that. Charge bonus is 18, which is shockingly high if you think about it, and mass is 150, or your typical weapons team's armored rat level per entity. And again, 160 of them. Even Sword and Board is harder to bully than clan rats. As typical, the unit has the scurry away mechanic, can hide in forest, and has strength in numbers, and to put special attention on it, if hit points are over 50% base, you get minus 10% speed, that's a detriment. But plus 6 leadership when 70 was your starting floor, and plus 8 melee defense, so 36 becomes 44. It's not high elf martial prowess, but it's not bad. And the presence of so much armor means it's harder to get this unit below 50% health than clan rats. Now we move on to the Halberds variant. Recruited for 1050 gold and 262 upkeep. Health is identical at 9,920 across 160 entities. Armor remains 90, no shields at all. Leadership still 70, speed 38, charge speed 45, melee attack begins at 32 or 6 less. That is a clear downgrade. Attack interval remains 4.6, as in, the halberds are not one bit slower than Sword and Board, and once again, no splash damage. Melee defense begins at 34, which is actually 2 less than Sword and Board. Pretty good considering the lack of shields. Weapon strength is 32, or 2 less total, split base 9, and armor piercing 23 damage. As in, the tilt is flipped from base heavy to AP heavy. Therefore, the irony is that in spite of less melee attack, this is the clearly superior option against heavily armored infantry like Dwarf. And what number do we get from the gacha? Bonus versus large of 17. That's not as high as some units get, but it's far, far from garbage. That means base melee attack against large targets is 49. Charge bonus is 10, so significantly less bite on the charge than sword version, and mass is 150 again. Scurry away, hide in forest, and strength in numbers all apply, the latter turning melee defense into 42 when over 50% health, and given the nature of the unit, it has charge defense versus large, and charge reflection if and when braced and charged from the front by a large unit. It's conditional, but reflection means double damage against the attacker during the charge bonus's duration. This is the floor. It never gets worse than this, barring in-battle debuffs and spells and so on. In the redline skills, Respected and Feared at 3 pips provides melee attack plus 6 and weapon strength plus 9%. Absolutely, the weapon strength is great, but the real power here is the melee attack, taking the sword unit to 44 at rank 0, the halberds to 38 in the mosh pit, 55 versus large. Whip Smart gives rank 7 and up Stormvermin leadership plus 5, melee attack plus 5, and missile resistance 15% because who wants to get shot? In the tech tree, hit and run as the blanket plus 10% speed it does to all infantry. Set examples is plus 3 leadership across the board, requisition protective gear as plus 5 armor, best of the best as plus 2 recruit rank, and ensure absolute loyalty as plus 5 melee attack and melee defense to Stormvermin, which most certainly raises their productivity in battle. So how do we use the Stormvermin? Let me ritually remind you that each unit has 160 entities at full strength because seriously, it's so unusual, it's easy to forget. Let's get this out of the way. Weapons teams' mains hate using Stormvermin because friendly fire chews through an actually valuable unit in terms of balance of power, and Stormvermin are kinda tall, so it's harder to shoot just above it to hit enemies on the other side of the front line. How big a problem this is varies greatly with circumstance. It's to the point people rate the summons as pretty good, but the recruited unit as not good. Also, they take 2 turns to recruit unless you are using a leveled Queek Headtaker, so for everybody else, because he doesn't affect the whole faction, an army has to sit and wait for a bit to get them, and a lot of people don't want to. So there's that. Let's take the halberd version. Since it's armor-piercing, it is, by itself, a complete, one-stop solution to almost all of your melee cavalry opponents, and while not as reliable against monstrous infantry and single-entity opponents, nonetheless serves as one of your chief deterrents to those. If nothing else, charge defense stops you from taking charge bonus damage from charges that humans and knife-eaters are so fond of. Since they're not terrible against man-sized infantry and are armor-piercing tilted at any rate, some people refuse to use the other variants completely. This is understandable, but it is not a complete solution. The halberds punch up, you see. The sword version punches down. It is a bully unit. And what I always mean by a bully unit is something that can efficiently deal with less elite units. This isn't purely the case when dealing with heavy armor or higher qualities of trash, okay? But they aren't fighting in their fursuits against the enemy. A minimum of 90 armor means regular swordsmen and spearmen will be completely ineffective against them and will drown in a sea of entities to the point one Stormvermin unit can fight off both swordsmen and spearmen at the same time and be just fine. Because one of the reasons I keep reminding you about the entity count on Ultra is because relative to other units with smaller entities, the Stormvermin in tight regimented ranks take up space. They are denying the enemy room to operate in its comfort level. Sword and board Stormvermin hate fighting fair, and prosper immensely in unfair fights almost regardless of the enemy's number. No amount of skeleton warriors will look scary enough to them. The other half of this is simply a matter of what the enemy brings to the fight. Halberds are no better at resisting armor-piercing missile fire than Blackguard of Nagaroth. The fact I even have to mention such a storied elite unit is to point out this is a weakness, but not a weakness worth obsessing about, if you can put cheaper units in the line of fire first. Saving halberds to shut off flanks or police the backside of your Plague Claw catapults is not unreasonable. In a siege that I had with a single warlord and a decent garrison, there was a single area that had a backside route to the victory point with 1 Clanrat Spears plus some minor Night Runner help getting overwhelmed by multiple cav units. I snuck 1 halberd unit of 2 around to take over that fight, and boy did it. Completely shutting down Knights Errant and Knights of the Realm, and if there was something else I missed it. At some point the enemy just gave up completely. This is why I say the knock against Stormvermin is valid, but it's also irrelevant if you're in the situations where they will completely flip the table over for you. For pure frontline, 90 armor and bronze shields will still last a stupidly long time against a lot of threats. For pure anti-monster, the halberds will force the enemy's max target splashed 5 or whatever to fight through a fair chunk of 160 entities before the high leadership is broken. There's so much time bought. You should have designed your forces with enough help to take advantage of that time and bail the fight out. In short, the killing power of Stormvermin is adequate. It's the staying power of the Stormvermin that completely rewrites the rules the faction normally is forced to live by. The rest is all upside. Stormvermin are an absolute sponge for other things you can do to affect a fight, like numerous buffs and debuffs to the enemy. They are amazing as ways to dilute damage for your own single-entity monsters, or for lack of a deep roster in this area, Rat Ogres and Doom Flayers. Characters will turn their leadership from high to fanatic, fight-die to the last rat levels. None of this changes that if you're doing so much friendly fire damage, Stormvermin are a liability, then you shouldn't be using them that way. If you are playing in a way you can work around them as powerful blocker units, lining up your wind spells and warp lightning and deleting their enemies, then Stormvermin can help you not just win, but win with lopsided casualty counts in ways Skaven aren't supposed to. That's really the lesson of this video. Stormvermin aren't there to be chosen, because chosen have literally half the entities. They're there to be good enough, to be armored and defensive enough to be really annoying to gnaw through, and to bite off the enemy's nose while you get the battle organized. That's not a solution to everything, and even the shield Stormvermin can't charge an Empire gun line willy-nilly and expect good things. It's just, if you make the right choices and have the right matchups, you will distort the results in your favor. Stormvermin are for those who want to break the rules a little, or a lot. You just have to plan ahead for that because, two-term recruitment. But that's in a tier 3 building in a chain you can build in minor settlements. Take care, and have fun taking the old world by storm!